On this slide, let's see, you'll have to help me if I don't, let's see. Okay, a ligament, the falciform ligament of the liver demarcates a large, yeah. So I don't know if you're looking at this slide, you have this slide, but, so the falciform ligament demarcates a large right lobe and a smaller left lobe. These are anatomical lobes, not functional lobes. And now, there was another slide, or was it this slide where I talk about right and left?
It was a few slides back down. It's like 4 slides.
Backwards?
Forward.
Forward? Tell me where.
Slide 19.
Slide 19, let's see, right here.
Yep.
Okay, now I say the small images at the top here can be used to define functional lobes of the liver. And it's, okay. Functional lobes, right and left. Is that what confused you? So I'm saying right and left, and you were thinking I was meaning right and left anatomical lobes. There are right and left anatomical lobes, of course, defined by the falciform ligament. Is that clear? There are also right and left functional lobes. And those lobes are defined not by the placement of the falciform ligament, but by the portions of the liver that are supplied by right and left hepatic arteries. Okay? They are right and left. They're just right and left functional lobes. So I was explaining then, if you would go to this, a picture like this and draw a line from the fundus of the gallbladder back here to the groove where the inferior vena cava is going through, that line very closely approximates the border between the right and left functional lobes. Okay? So does that, are you good on that? You're good. All right, thumbs up. So, yeah, so the inferior vena cava, you don't see that right here. You see where, this is where that groove, there's a fossa for the inferior vena cava on the posterior aspect of the liver. And that would be, well, you see it right here in this region. On this liver, it would be about right here. Oh, sorry. Here's the fossa for the inferior vena cava on this diagram. That fossa would be about right here. So if we drew a line like this, from the gallbladder back to the inferior vena cava, then we would have a left functional lobe here, and to the right of that line, we would have a right functional lobe. So the right functional lobe is still a little bit bigger than the left functional lobe, but they're more closely, they're more equal in size, closer to being equal than the left and right anatomical lobes. Okay? You are welcome. So let's go back to this other slide set here. Let's see. Okay, so I think we're pretty clear on this, right? The next series of slides that I have are represent a series of dissections through the abdomen. We'll mostly focus on the glandular aspect, but a lot of this stuff is going to be familiar to you. I'll just do this myself unless somebody else wants to come up and don't have a lot of takers. It's a lot of fun being up here. I don't know why you don't like this, but so when I look at a drawing like this, and this is how I think it would be good for you to think about it, and also just in terms of taking the exam too, when you come to a station and you're looking at an anatomical image, what's been done here? How did we create that image? So we've made some incisions through the anterior abdominal wall, and we've reflected the folds. We're looking at the posterior surface of the anterior abdominal wall. So we're looking here at parietal peritoneum, right? So if we place our hand down here on this structure, which now we know that's the greater omentum, our hand is in the greater sac. It's in the peritoneal cavity. Specifically, we're in the greater sac. So we see the greater omentum. We know it's attached to the greater curvature of the stomach. It forms this apron-like structure that comes down and folds back up on itself, and then is attached to the transverse colon right here that we see. So we also see the inferior margin of the liver, the sharp angle, so we're seeing part of the diaphragmatic surface here. And we see this structure right here, that's the falciform ligament, extending from the liver to the anterior abdominal wall. So here's part of the left lobe, anatomical lobe of the liver. We see just a little bit of the right anatomical lobe, and a little bit of the gallbladder, the fundus of the gallbladder coming out from extending beyond the inferior margin of the liver. So now just think about this. What about the lesser omentum that's going to connect the stomach to the liver? Where do we see that here? Where is that? So it's going to be attached to the lesser curvature of the stomach, which we don't quite see here because this portion of the liver, this portion of the left anatomical lobe looks like it's attached to the lesser curvature. It's not really attached to it, it's just lying in opposition to it. It's just lying on the surface. If we put our hand in this space right here, that space is called what? That's the subhepatic space, and if our hand went in there, it would just slide up along a sheet of membrane. What would that be? That would be the lesser omentum. And if we follow the lesser omentum by moving our hand to the right in this specimen, to the anatomical right. In other words, if we put our hand in this little groove right here and moved it over this way, our hand would be moving along the body of the stomach, coming over towards the antrum and then towards the pyloric end of the stomach. We would come to the free margin of the lesser omentum, and that's where we would see the portal triad. We would see the hepatic portal vein, we would see branches of the hepatic artery, and we would see the bile duct there. Okay? So I think that's what we see in this picture. Now, we go to something else. What have we done here in order to go deeper? The greater omentum is gone, so we've taken out a large chunk of the GI tract. So what was transected right here? The stomach near the attachment with the esophagus, right? Mm-hmm. So the stomach should have been lying right in this region, and then there's this transection. What would this be? Good, duodenum. And we see the duodenum, here's the superior portion of the duodenum, then it seems to disappear. What would be back in this region, related to what part of the duodenum would be back here?
The C4?
This would be the descending part, and that's where the liver and the pancreas are going to have that's where they're going to enter the duodenum. We can't see the duodenum now because it's posterior to the right colic flexure, or hepatic flexure. But now we see the duodenum right here, and this is the horizontal portion, or third portion, and here it elevates the ascending portion, or fourth portion. So what was cut right here? This is small intestine. It's near the duodenal jejunal junction. That's where this was cut. And then the rest of the small intestine is gone. But what is this? The mesentery proper. So that's what was spreading out to cover all of the small intestine. And then this. There's the ileum right there. Okay. So then what we were really interested in up here for today's session was the glandular stuff. So here's the lesser omentum. It's a double-walled membrane, so it's coming from the lesser curvature of the stomach to the liver, and now it's going to attach to the liver and spread out to the right and left. Okay, and totally enclose the liver. It's going to go over this portion of the gallbladder. The superior surface of the gallbladder right here is attached directly to the liver. We don't say it's retroperitoneal, but it is attached directly to the liver, and there are veins then that go into, drain the wall of the gallbladder directly into the sinusoids of the liver. So then the visceral peritoneum covers the liver, but it's going to come off of the liver right here. It comes off and forms the falciform ligament that's going to attach the liver to the anterior abdominal wall. And then, of course, here's the retroperitoneal pancreas. So we have the head of the pancreas over here towards the right. And we saw from that other image we were looking at, it had the head is this large part, and there's a little bit of the head that goes posterior to the superior mesenteric artery, which is right here. It goes, the uncinate process of the pancreas goes posterior to the superior mesenteric artery. Then we have the neck of the pancreas right here, just anterior to the superior mesenteric vessels, body, and the tail going over here to the hilum of the spleen. This is the spleen over here. We didn't really talk much about that. Okay, so that's good. Let's see, what do I have? Liver, visceral surface, gallbladder, the neck, body, and fundus. Are you okay with that?
No.
And what about this cystic duct? What parts of that can you see in here? Can you actually, can you imagine where it's attaching to the bile duct? Or to the,
Right there.
actually it would attach to the common hepatic duct to form the bile duct. You can't,
I think you
yeah, so this would be the neck of the gallbladder. Opposite that, here would be the fundus. All in between is the body. And then this would be the cystic duct. I think you can kind of see where it joins the common hepatic duct. This is it right here to form the bile duct, which disappears because it's going to go posterior to the duodenum. It's actually kind of goes posterior to the head of the pancreas too, but then it enters the second part, or the descending part of the duodenum. And if we open up the duodenum, you see that major duodenal papilla. That was some of the stuff that we talked about there. Okay, so let me, I just left this in here. I can't play this video. This is where they want me to sign in and give my age and all this stuff. Some of you may be able to figure out how to watch this laparoscopic surgery. This was fun to do the last year, because they go in, they dissect apart the lesser omentum, so they find the cystic artery, and then they identify the cystic duct and the common hepatic duct. They put ligatures around the cystic artery and transect that. And then they put ligatures around the cystic duct and transect that. And then they take a cautery tool and dissect the gallbladder out of the fossa of the gallbladder. So they're cauterizing all the little veins that are going from the wall of the gallbladder into the liver. And then they take the gallbladder and put it in what looks like a Ziploc bag, and then they pull the bag out through the little port that they've made they poked into the abdominal wall. So if you can get this video or one like it, it's kind of fun to watch, and I think it'll be very easy to comprehend. So, okay, so here we've dissected a little bit further. So what have we done to go from here to the next slide? It looks like we're going to take out some of the large intestine. So what did we take away from here?
ascending.
The ascending. And here is where we've transected the transverse mesocolon, because the transverse colon is intraperitoneal. Here's where we took out the descending colon. We've left the duodenum. So here's this part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4 of the duodenum right here. We see the head of the pancreas just encircled by that C-shaped duodenum. We see the neck, body, and tail of the pancreas. What artery would this be right here? That's the splenic artery, so that's a major branch of the celiac trunk, and it would be giving a large number of branches directly into the body and tail of the pancreas. And then, what do we have right here? That's the triad. So we have the hepatic portal vein, we have some left and right hepatic arteries, and there's a green thing in there. That would be the common hepatic duct probably at this level. So I have some other questions in here. Let's see, I never know what I've written, so. What organ
Stomach?
connects to the proximal end of the duodenum?
Stomach?
What organ connects to the distal end of the duodenum?
Jejunum?
Yeah. Estimate the location of the celiac trunk.
Can you say the answers?
So, I'm gonna ask, these are, what organ connects to the proximal end of the duodenum? Yeah, so I've heard, stomach, the pyloric end of the stomach would attach to the proximal end of the duodenum. What organ connects to the distal end of the duodenum? That would be the jejunum. And I just mentioned duodenojejunoflexure. That's just where the duodenum and jejunum hook up. But the duodenum is coming off of the posterior abdominal wall because all of the jejunum is intraperitoneal, so you get this kind of a sharp bend. Now estimate the location of the celiac trunk. So if to do that, I don't really see, I see the aorta here, and I see it up here. But if we follow the splenic artery back to its origin, it would be about right here. So this is about the where the origin of the celiac trunk is, and then the superior mesenteric artery takes origin from the aorta, but just posterior to the neck of the pancreas. So the celiac trunk and the superior mesenteric artery come off usually within like about a centimeter of each other. They're very close together. The ascending and the descending colon has been removed. What physical evidence of their location is visible? So it's just where there's no parietal peritoneum here on the posterior abdominal wall. So this is like the scar of where the ascending colon was, and here's the site of the descending colon. So you see a bunch of branches right here that have been cut. What arteries would be supplying these little arteries right here? Right, the inferior mesenteric artery, because the descending colon is part of the hindgut, and that's what we're cutting right here. These vessels are on their way to the hindgut. And then, let's see, was there anything? I guess there's nothing else there with the glands. Okay, so here now, I guess let's see, demonstrates what organs have been removed. So again, how did we make this image? That just helps get you oriented to the anatomy. This isn't all that different. The main thing we've taken away here is the parietal peritoneum that was lining the posterior abdominal wall. So now we have a clear view of the pancreas. Here's the head of the pancreas, and you see that relationship to the duodenum. Here's the superior mesenteric vessels. So this is the neck of the pancreas. Here's the body, and then the tail. We've taken the spleen out over here. It's gone. So the celiac trunk has the splenic artery, the common hepatic artery. Here's the gastroduodenal artery. It's transected here. It's very short, but that's So now that's where we would change the name from common hepatic artery to proper hepatic artery. So and then it divides into a right and left branch. That would be the right and left hepatic artery. Those are the vessels that enter the porta hepatis of the liver. And then inferior mesenteric artery, here you don't really see the origin of it. It's just behind this fourth part of the duodenum, but here are some of the branches that are going. Here's some going to the sigmoid colon. And and this is then this last statement I'm just mentioning again, that there are branches to the head of the pancreas, some of which come from the celiac trunk, from the gastroduodenal branch here, and some come from the superior mesenteric. Earlier on, we were talking, I thought we had mentioned this before, it's a little beyond what we need to know, but there's this gastroduodenal will have a branch called the superior pancreaticoduodenal. So that branch will supply both the head of the pancreas and part of the duodenum. And then this artery coming off the superior mesenteric is the inferior pancreaticoduodenal artery. So, yes?
So isn't it just like a lot of the retroperitoneal organs? So wasn't the, aren't the, also,
So they are, so in this one, we've taken them off of the posterior abdominal wall. Here's the ascending, where the ascending colon was. This was like the scar for the ascending. Here's the scar for the descending. But on this next slide now, we've just taken off all of the peritoneum from the posterior abdominal wall and taken away some of this adipose tissue back there, just sort of clean things up, mostly with a paintbrush. But yeah, so now we have both the secondarily retroperitoneal organs, which would be the duodenum and the pancreas, and the true retroperitoneal or primary retroperitoneal organs, which would be the kidneys, adrenals, inferior vena cava, aorta. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to give you a moment to just take in this picture and what has been done, and then work on the list here. So I guess I probably describe what's going on. I'm just going to take a little break, go to the restroom. I'll be right back, and then I'll expect you'll have lots of questions, and someone will help us walk through this section. So I'll be right back. Is this comprehensible?
Where's the celiac trunk?
Any questions about this?
So is this a celiac trunk?
Where?
Celiac trunk.
No, dude. It's right there. Oh, sorry, right there.
Yeah, question?
You see that? That's splenic and
Oh,
hepatic.
Oh, this one.
Celiac trunk.
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah.
coming from aorta.
What space is indicated by the curved arrow? Is that the one? So what was your answer? What did you? Subhepatic space. So the curved arrow is right here. So the actually going through the space that connects the greater sac to the lesser sac. That's the epiploic foramen or omental foramen. Did we talk about that? You know it now, yeah. So that's the only connection between the greater sac and the lesser sac. So yeah, that's that. Yeah, we showed it in another slide, I think, where there's a slide in or a figure in your textbook where a
Greater omentum.
gloved finger is going through that
Greater
epiploic
omentum.
foramen. So, and then when you
Transverse
do
means
that,
equivalent, and then greater omentum.
if you put your finger through that
Yeah.
epiploic foramen and pull anteriorly, you're actually tugging on the portal
I
triad.
need to study the lecture
Because
first
that's,
before I do
that's
the
where
work.
the
Before
portal
you do the
vein
lab?
is the
Because
hepatic artery.
I just don't familiar with the word. So
Bile duct. That's where they would be. Good. Yeah, so all we've done here, this is a little bit complicated. We've transected the greater omentum and lifted the stomach. So now we've lifted the greater curvature of the stomach. So here is the lesser sac. This is the lesser sac, and the only way out of there without a scalpel is to go through this omental foramen right here that the curved arrow is in. This, of course, is the celiac trunk. Okay. So then here we just have a nice example of the, well, what are we looking at here? This is the pancreas. Is this the tail or the head of the pancreas? It's the tail. So we've dissected out the main pancreatic duct right here. And now we did mention that there is often an accessory pancreatic duct. There it is, that usually has a connection to the main pancreatic duct. And then somewhere right in here, I don't really see it, there would be a major duodenal papilla. They're showing it in the diagram. You can usually see this when you open up the duodenum. One of the students this year has dissected a pancreas like this and showed that major pancreatic duct. It takes a lot of patience to do that. But okay, so identify pancreas, duodenum, main pancreatic duct, accessory pancreatic duct, and bile duct. Does anybody see the bile duct here in this image? Nobody, nobody wants to come up and show me. I get a point. Everybody good with those structures? Okay, and then, so this is, you can go over this. You see the duodenum, pyloric end of the stomach, the duodenum, major duodenal papilla. There's a minor one too, so.
What's the bile duct?
Here's the bile duct now coming down. We don't quite see where it joins the main pancreatic duct. These vessels would be superior mesenteric artery and vein, yeah. No questions here? Okay, so I hope we're almost to the VHD. I have too much stuff in here. Okay, that list of terms that I have there, are you okay with those? Yeah? And now we're looking at the visceral surface. Oh, a long list of terms. So, visceral surface, inferior border, that's just here. Of course, you see the gallbladder, porta hepatis, so I think we have that straight. This is the area of the porta hepatis. Hepatic ducts, right and left, we see there, that's what's coming out of the liver, so here would be the right one. The left one's a little bit hidden back there, but it would be there. So what would this duct be? Common hepatic duct. And then, well, so, and what's this duct? So
Cystic
that,
duct.
so this portion of the green duct right here
Bile
would be
duct. No, that's
common bile duct.
Yeah.
I think the trend these days is to just call it bile duct, so, yes, question?
I just have a question about this like orientation. Is this like as if someone's laying on their stomach?
Posterior, right?
Yeah, so the question is about the orientation of this
So
liver.
take the liver.
So just look at
In
this
a-
liver, think about how is the
This is your
person
anterior part.
oriented?
This
So,
is your anterior part.
you-
This is your posterior part.
we suggested that this
Oh,
person is
right,
lying
that's
on their
right.
stomach, and that's one way.
Just the same
I
way,
look
you
at
just,
this,
take it out
my
and put it
thinking
back
is
there.
that the
Take the
person
liver,
is looking
put it there.
away from me, they're standing here like this, and then we just taken the liver out, but it's still in anatomical position. So we're looking at the visceral surface. This is the inferior margin right here. This is the posterior aspect. Here's the inferior vena cava attached to the posterior abdominal wall. So we're not seeing much of the diaphragmatic surface of the liver. Yeah, that's a good question. That's the important point about getting yourself oriented to these diagrams. Yes?
Did you orient Morgan?
Yeah, so the inferior vena cava through most of its course is retroperitoneal, but then it comes anteriorly and it actually penetrates the central tendon of the diaphragm. So it doesn't, it's not like the aorta, which actually goes posterior to the diaphragm. The inferior vena cava goes through the diaphragm, through the central tendon. Yeah, it's come, at that, as it goes through the diaphragm, it's no longer retroperitoneal. And then, of course, what would we have right here?
Lines there.
Good. And then here? Very good. So this is the caudate lobe of the liver, right here. And this is the quadrate lobe. Okay, can I go over the functional and anatomical lobes? Yes. Do you want to? No. I don't get much. You really learn it when you tell everybody else about it. But so we see what would this be right here? That's that's the round ligament, which is at the inferior margin of the falciform ligament. That's all correct. And it was in the fetus, it was the umbilical vein. Then this is the left umbilical fissure, this space right here. So this part of the liver would be, we would call this, what would you name this part of the liver? What would you, how could you identify this?
Functional lobe. Functional lobe.
Left anatomical lobe, and then this would be, of course,
Right.
the right anatomical lobe. Now, what about functional lobes? Here's the hepatic artery going in, the proper hepatic artery going into the porta hepatis, and it divides into a right hepatic artery, left hepatic artery. So right about here is where we would have the division between the right and left functional lobes. And like surgically, they draw a line between the fundus of the gallbladder and the inferior vena cava. So you can see that's pretty close. So this would be the right functional lobe. This would be the left functional lobe. So basically for functional lobes, what we've done is moved the caudate and quadrate lobe to the left. And then the right functional lobe is supplied by arterial blood from the right hepatic artery, and then same for the left. Okay? We've covered that. And then here's an image from Rowan's atlas. This is, now we've taken the anterior abdominal wall off of this specimen. We're looking, here's the diaphragm. So we're looking at the diaphragmatic surface. In order to remove the anterior abdominal wall, we had to transect through the falciform ligament. The umbilical vein would be down here. We see the inferior margin. We see the fundus of the gallbladder right there. What would this be right here? Very good. And this space here?
Subhepatic.
Yep, in this space.
Subphrenic space.
So subhepatic space down here underneath the liver, and between the liver and the diaphragm. I call that the subphrenic space. I hear subdiaphragmatic space, which I think that's okay. Okay, I wanted to get to these VHD. So now look at this liver, and again, ask yourself, what's the orientation of this specimen? Yeah,
It's
so
inferior.
this is the posterior aspect of the liver. Here's the inferior margin of the liver. So here's the left anatomical lobe, here's the right anatomical lobe. So it is like this person is on their back, we're at their feet, and we're looking up at the visceral surface. So here's the,
So
yeah, the
VHD
right
card.
lobe, of course, we see the gallbladder. What would this quadrate, and here's caudate back
Caudate.
here. And we see, of course, the gallbladder, the fundus out here, the body, the neck. We don't really see it all that well, but we see the cystic duct right here. So here's the common hepatic duct. And then this transected part right here is actually the bile duct. This is the inferior vena cava. So what would this be?
Portal vein.
Hepatic portal vein, yeah. I see, I mean, aorta, you think it's a large tube, but the aorta would actually be posterior to this. It's not represented here. This is the hepatic portal vein. So that, go over the gallbladder again. So the gallbladder is here attached to the fossa for the gallbladder, it's called, on the inferior surface, or visceral surface of the liver. This portion extending, usually extending beyond the inferior border a little bit, is the fundus. The neck of the gallbladder is here, where it narrows to become continuous with the cystic duct. And all this part in between the fundus and the neck is the body.
When I first looked at the picture, I thought that might be the inferior vena cava. How do I know to tell that?
So,
Because it looks like in all the pictures we've seen that the gallbladder is like below the liver, and this looks like it's going up.
yeah, so that's part of getting oriented. So the remark here was that, and first looking at this image, it looked like this was the inferior vena cava going behind the liver, on its way to the diaphragm here. I can kind of see what you mean. I don't know, so I just get myself oriented to the porta hepatis, and then you see these umbilical fissures, like especially this one over here on the left. This is where the falciform ligament would be attached. Here's the ligamentum teres of the liver, round ligament of the liver. And then here is the inferior vena cava itself on the posterior margin. So I don't,
So is the inferior vena cava always like at the bottom of the liver?
the inferior vena cava is always associated with the posterior aspect of the liver. So that's why I said when you need to look at a picture like this and get oriented to how the donor is oriented.
More inferior, or is it,
Well, if they're lying, so this person would be lying down and we'd be at their feet, looking towards their head. So we're looking at the visceral surface of the liver. And then we're not seeing the diaphragmatic surface. It would be, we'd have to put our hand over the inferior margin here, and it would go onto the diaphragmatic surface. Okay. Yes? Yeah, so I've shown you a lot of slides, and the question was for the exam, will I only use images from the slide that I've used? Yeah, so if I use something else, it's going to be like exactly like, or it's not going to be foreign to you. And mostly, I mean, I've shown you a lot of pictures, so. And what I didn't get to, here's some more, and I think you can go through this. Do these look familiar? There's a lot of these. This is kind of cool. So this is a, and I see that we're done here. Boy, I talk too much. Do you have a question? Yeah. No, you don't. No, we don't. I'm not going to bring heads or GI